Ambassador Elena Vasquez adjusted her collar as she reviewed the briefing documents one final time. The UES Harmony had been humanity's first dedicated diplomatic vessel, launched when the Galactic Council had finally acknowledged Earth's petition for membership after 3 decades of waiting. What should have been humanity's triumphant entry into galactic civilization had instead become a careful dance of survival. The council chambers stretched before her like a vast amphitheater, filled with representatives from 47 different species. Each delegation occupied specially designed sections accommodating their unique physiologies. Aquatic mora in their fluid-filled chambers, crystalline vec hovering in electromagnetic fields, and the towering brutans with their 4 arms crossed. In traditional greeting postures, High Chancellor Roth, a Velen whose blue-scaled features betrayed nothing, called the session to order. We address today the unusual circumstances surrounding humanity's application for council membership. Elena stood, her human frame dwarfed by the alien architecture around her. Honored representatives, humanity comes before you not as conquerors or supplicants, but as equals seeking partnership among the stars. A low rumble of what she'd learned to recognize as skeptical amusement rippled through the chamber. The Bruton's translator crackled to life. Equals? Your species has existed for mere millennia. You have not even learned to control your own violent impulses. With respect, Elena replied, her voice carrying across the vast space. We have learned something perhaps more valuable, how to channel those impulses toward protection rather than conquest. She activated her holographic display, showing images of human colonies scattered across the galaxy's rim. In the past 50 years, we have established settlements on worlds you deemed uninhabitable. We have thrived where others feared to venture. More importantly, we have defended those who could not defend themselves. The Mora representative's aquatic chamber bubbled with translated speech. The incidents at Kepler 442b and Proxima Centauri c were unauthorized military actions. The Council specifically forbade interference in those conflicts. Elena's jaw tightened slightly. Both incidents had involved human intervention against slave-trading operations and genocidal campaigns. Sometimes, honored delegates, what is legally correct and what is morally necessary diverge. Humanity chose conscience over compliance. High Chancellor Roth's scales shifted to a deeper blue, a sign of serious consideration. Your species' tendency toward unilateral action concerns many council members. How can we trust a civilization that ignores established protocols? Because, Elena said, stepping forward, when the Draknari death fleets threatened the UN homeworld 3 years ago, it wasn't council protocols that saved 2 billion innocent lives. It was human ships, human crews, and human willingness to risk everything for strangers. The chamber fell silent. The UN delegation, small, herbivorous beings whose entire civilization had nearly been exterminated, stood as one in acknowledgement. Their translator whispered, "The humans came when no one else would. They asked for nothing in return." Chancellor Roth's scales shifted again, this time to a lighter shade indicating thoughtful consideration. The Council will deliberate. Ambassador Vasquez, you have presented compelling arguments. But understand, membership requires more than moral courage. It requires integration with our established systems. Elena nodded respectfully. We understand, Chancellor. But perhaps what the galaxy needs isn't another species that follows orders without question. Perhaps it needs one that asks the difficult questions and acts when action is necessary. As the session adjourned, Elena gathered her materials with steady hands. This was only the beginning. Humanity's greatest diplomatic challenge lay not in proving they belonged among the stars, but in proving the stars needed them. 3 days after the initial hearing, Elena found herself in the Council's historical archives, a crystalline maze where the collective memory of galactic civilization was stored in quantum matrices. Archivist Prime Keldon, an ancient Vec whose crystal lattice had grown dim with age, guided her through corridors lined with shimmering data cores. Your species fascinates the archivists, Keldon's harmonics translated into her neural implant. So much violence, yet so much growth. Most curious. Elena paused before a massive display showing Earth's history compiled by long-range council observers. Images of human warfare flickered alongside scenes of art, exploration, and scientific breakthrough. "We are what we are," she said quietly. "The question is whether the Council can accept that our darkness and our light come from the same source." "Explain," Keldon chimed, his crystalline form refracting the archive's ambient light into rainbow patterns. Elena touched the display, calling up images of human conflicts throughout history. Every war taught us something about the cost of violence. Every tragedy showed us the value of peace. We didn't transcend our nature. We learned to direct it. The display shifted to show the Proxima Centauri incident in detail. Human warships, outnumbered 10-1, had engaged a Draknari slaving fleet. The tactical readouts showed impossible odds, yet the humans had not only won, but had done so while protecting 3 civilian evacuation convoys. This action violated 17 Council protocols, Keldon observed. Yet the tactical efficiency suggests careful planning, not reckless aggression. "Captain Torres spent 3 weeks running simulations," Elena confirmed. She knew exactly what she was risking: her ship, her crew, her species' future in the Council. But she also knew that waiting for official approval meant watching innocents die. They moved deeper into the archives where older conflicts were stored. Elena called up records of the Vegan War, where Council forces had spent 2 years deliberating while an entire star system burned. The formal response had come only after the genocide was complete. "The Council learns from its mistakes too," Keldon said, his harmonics carrying what Elena had learned to recognize as defensive undertones. "I'm sure it does," Elena replied diplomatically. "But learning from mistakes is different from preventing them. Humans have a saying: the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good beings to do nothing." Keldon's crystal structure flickered, the Vec equivalent of deep thought. "Yet your species' definition of evil may not align with others. What gives humans the right to decide?" Elena turned to face the ancient archivist directly. "The same thing that gives anyone that right: the willingness to act and accept the consequences. When Captain Torres engaged the Draknari, she knew she might be court-martialed. When Commander Blake defended the UN colonies, he knew humanity might be expelled from Council consideration. They acted anyway because someone had to." The display showed more recent events: human relief efforts, peacekeeping missions, and technological sharing with developing species. In each case, humans had acted first and sought permission later, if at all. "Your species appears incapable of following established hierarchies," Keldon observed. "Perhaps," Elena acknowledged. "But consider this. In 3,000 years of Council history, how many genocides have been prevented through proper channels? How many catastrophes averted through committee decisions?" The silence stretched as Keldon accessed historical records. When he spoke again, his harmonics carried an undertone Elena hadn't heard before. "You raise uncomfortable questions, Ambassador." Elena smiled sadly. "That's what humans do. We ask the questions others are afraid to voice. We take the actions others hesitate to consider. It makes us dangerous, yes, but it also makes us necessary." As they prepared to leave the archives, Keldon's form brightened with what Elena had learned indicated sudden understanding. "You are not seeking membership to join our civilization," he chimed. "You are seeking membership to change it." Elena met his crystal gaze without flinching. "The galaxy is vast, Archivist Prime. There's room for both caution and courage. The question is whether the Council has the wisdom to embrace both." The emergency session convened at 0300 Galactic Standard Time, jolting Elena from uneasy sleep. As she hurried through the Harmony's corridors, her aide Marcus briefed her on the developing crisis. Long-range sensors detected a massive fleet. "Movement in the Outer Rim," he reported, his face grim. "Intelligence suggests it's the hegemony." Elena felt ice form in her stomach. The hegemony. A coalition of militaristic species that had been expelled from the Council 2 centuries ago for their expansionist policies. Their return could only mean one thing: war. In the emergency chamber, representatives sat in stunned silence as tactical displays showed the approaching threat. 300 warships heading directly for the Council's core worlds. High Chancellor Roth's scales had shifted to deep violet, the Velen color of fear. Current projections show the hegemony fleet will reach Vec Prime in 6 standard days, reported Admiral Kress, a Bruton whose forearms gestured rapidly at the tactical displays. Council defense forces are mobilizing, but our ships are scattered. Across 47 systems, we cannot mount an effective defense in time. Elena studied the display with growing concern. The hegemony's route would take them through 3 inhabited systems, including one with a large human colony. What are the defensive capabilities of the threatened worlds? Minimal, Admiral Kress admitted. Most Council worlds rely on the guarantee of collective defense. Individual planetary shields and defense platforms were deemed unnecessary expense. Unnecessary, Elena repeated quietly. Until now. Chancellor Roth's voice carried across the chamber. We must issue formal demands for hegemony withdrawal and call for immediate ceasefire negotiations. Elena stood, her movement drawing attention from every delegation. Chancellor, with respect, the hegemony didn't announce their intentions or seek dialogue. They're not coming to negotiate. The Mora representatives' chamber bubbled with agitation. Human ambassador advocates premature military response? This validates concerns about your species' aggressive tendencies. No, Elena replied firmly. I'm advocating for the protection of innocent lives. My species has dealt with aggressors before. Diplomatic protests don't stop invasion fleets. She activated her personal display, showing historical records from Earth. In our year 1939, a leader named Churchill warned his government about growing militaristic threats. He was ignored until it was almost too late. We learned that sometimes the cost of peace is higher than the cost of action. Chancellor Roth's scales shifted to deep blue. You suggest immediate military response without attempting dialogue? I suggest being prepared to defend ourselves while attempting dialogue, Elena corrected. The human colony at Kepler 438b lies directly in the hegemony's path. We have 12 million civilians there, including families from 17 different Council species who sought refuge after the Dreknari conflicts. The chamber stirred. Few had realized the diversity of the human colonies, or that they'd become havens for refugees from various galactic conflicts. Admiral Kress manipulated the tactical display, highlighting defensive positions. Human colonies, in the threatened region, report significant defensive capabilities. Orbital platforms, armed merchant vessels, and organized militia. They could delay hegemony advance. At what cost? Asked the UN representative, their translator conveying deep concern. Humans saved our species, but we cannot ask them to sacrifice themselves for Council indecision. Elena's voice carried across the chamber with quiet intensity. Admiral, how long would human defensive positions delay the hegemony fleet? Conservative estimates suggest 48 to 72 hours, Kress replied, assuming coordinated resistance and acceptable losses. Define acceptable, Elena said coldly. The Admiral's forearms moved in what Elena recognized as uncomfortable gestures. 60 to 70% casualties among defending forces. Near total civilian casualties if shields fail. The chamber erupted in multilingual chaos. Elena let the noise wash over her before speaking again, her voice cutting through the din. The humans at Kepler 438b won't run. It's not in our nature. But they deserve to know their sacrifice will mean something. Chancellor Roth called for order, his scales now shifting rapidly between colors. What do you propose, Ambassador? Elena looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes, or optical sensors, of every delegation. Give us 48 hours to evacuate civilians from the threatened worlds. Prepare the defense forces for coordinated response. And when the hegemony arrives, show them that the Council has learned the difference between diplomacy and appeasement. The vote was closer than Elena had hoped, but it passed. As representatives filed out to alert their respective fleets, the UN ambassador approached. Her, human Elena, their translator whispered. Your people saved ours once. Now they risk everything again. Why? Elena smiled sadly, thinking of the 12 million souls at Kepler 438b, who would soon face an enemy that outnumbered them beyond calculation. Because someone has to stand between the darkness and the light. Today, it's our turn. Captain Lisa. Park stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, watching the hegemony fleet approach through the tactical display. Around Kepler 438b, humanity's defensive network hummed with activity. 43 ships of various classes, 26 orbital defense platforms, and countless smaller craft loaded with evacuating civilians. Fleet composition analysis complete, reported her tactical officer, Lieutenant Hayes. 300 hegemony vessels confirmed, 12 dreadnoughts, 48 heavy cruisers, remainder assault ships and support craft. Park nodded grimly. The human defenders were outnumbered 7-1. But they had advantages: intimate knowledge of the system, prepared defensive positions, and something the hegemony hadn't faced in decades: humans with nothing left to lose. Status: on civilian evacuation? She asked. 83% complete, replied Commander Walsh from his position at the communications station. Remaining civilians are families refusing to leave. Park understood. Some things were worth more than survival. Open a channel to all ships. The bridge fell silent as her words went out to every human vessel in the system. This is Captain. Park to all defending units. We hold this line not just for ourselves, but for every species that calls the Council home. We hold it because someone must. We hold it because it's right. On her personal display, Elena's final message played. The Council Defense Forces were mobilizing, but wouldn't arrive for another 60 hours. The hegemony had refused all diplomatic overtures, and had already begun bombarding outer system installations. Humanity stood alone, as it had so many times before. Incoming transmission from the hegemony flagship, Walsh reported. The main display flickered to show a reptilian face marked with ritual scarification. Admiral Thex of the Dominion hegemony. Human vessels, you defend a world that is not yours in service of a council that does not accept you. Withdraw, and we will allow safe passage for your evacuation craft. Park stood slowly, her uniform crisp despite the circumstances. Admiral Thex, this world is home to 12 million souls from 17 different species. They are under our protection. Withdraw your fleet, and we'll allow you safe passage back to whatever hole you crawled out of. Thex's expression shifted to what Park recognized as amused contempt. Brave words from a doomed species. You cannot hope to stand against the hegemony's might. Maybe not, Park agreed. But we'll make you pay for every meter of space. Every shot you fire at civilians will cost you ships, crews, and time. The question is, how much are you willing to lose for the privilege of murdering innocents? The transmission ended. Around the system, human ships moved into final defensive positions. Park had studied every battle in human history, from Thermopylae to the Siege of Bastogne. Sometimes the strategic value of a last stand wasn't victory. It was buying time and showing the universe what principles looked like when tested by fire. Hegemony fleet entering engagement range, Hayes reported. They're forming attack formations. Park settled into her command chair, her hands steady on the armrests. All ships, weapons free. Fight smart, fight hard, and make every shot count. The first hegemony salvo lit up space around Kepler 438b. Human point defense systems activated, creating a web of intercepting fire that destroyed most incoming missiles. But some got through. The orbital platform Guardian took direct hits, its shields flaring before failing entirely. The explosion was visible from the planet's surface. Guardian destroyed, Hayes reported. No survivors. Park's jaw tightened. 300 humans had crewed that platform. Volunteers who had stayed behind to help with evacuation coordination. Target their flagship, all forward batteries, full spread. The Defiant shuddered as its weapons discharged. Across the system, human ships opened fire with coordinated precision. Years of training and preparation focused into moments of perfect tactical execution. Hegemony shields absorbed most hits, but several smaller vessels took critical damage. The battle raged for 6 hours. Human ships used every advantage. Asteroid fields for cover, pre-positioned mines, and the kind of desperate ingenuity that came from fighting for survival. They extracted a brutal price from the hegemony fleet, destroying 12 vessels and crippling twice as many more. But the outcome was never in doubt. One by one, human ships fell silent. The Courage exploded, taking a hegemony cruiser with it. The Resilience rammed an enemy dreadnought after losing weapons and propulsion. The Hope fought until her hull cracked and her crew was breathing vacuum. When the Defiant's shields finally failed, Park stood on her damaged bridge and opened one final channel to the hegemony flagship. "Admiral Thex," she said, her voice carrying clearly despite the smoke and sparks around her. "You've won this battle, but you've shown the galaxy exactly who you are, and you've shown them who we are too." The tactical display showed Council defense forces entering the outer system. Admiral Kress's fleet had arrived 12 hours early, drawn by the long-range sensor readings of the battle. Thex's scarred face reappeared on the screen. "Your sacrifice was meaningless, human. The hegemony will explain to the Council why they attacked a civilian population," Park interrupted. "Good luck with that." As the Defiant died around her, Captain Lisa Park smiled. "Sometimes, the most important victories were the ones you didn't live to see." The Council chambers had never seen such a gathering. Representatives from all 47 member species attended, along with delegations from 12 associate members and observers from 6 non-aligned worlds. The gallery, normally empty except for staff, overflowed with journalists, academics, and citizens who had traveled from across the galaxy to witness this historic session. Elena stood at the human delegation's position, her black diplomatic uniform bearing a small pin, the insignia of the UES Defiant. Around her, the massive chamber hummed with translation matrices working overtime to convert dozens of languages and communication methods into comprehensible dialogue. High Chancellor Roth's scales had settled into deep gold, the vellon color of profound ceremony. This emergency session addresses 3 matters: the hegemony attack on Kepler 438b, the human defense of that world, and humanity's petition for Council membership. Admiral Kress stood, his 4 arms moving in formal presentation gestures. The hegemony fleet of 300 vessels attacked without provocation or warning. Human defensive forces, outnumbered 7-1, held for 6 hours and 17 minutes, allowing complete civilian evacuation and providing time for Council forces to respond. The tactical displays showed the battle in clinical detail. 43 human ships against 300 hegemony vessels. Elena watched representatives lean forward as the data revealed the impossible mathematics of the engagement, how human forces had destroyed or disabled 67 enemy ships while suffering near-total losses themselves. Analysis of combat. Recordings reveals unprecedented tactical coordination, Kress continued. Human ships used resources and terrain to maximum advantage, extracting casualty ratios of nearly 2-1, despite overwhelming numerical disadvantage. The UN representative stood, their translator conveying deep emotion. "My species owes its existence to human intervention. Now we have witnessed humans sacrifice themselves for beings they had never met, on a world that was not their birthplace, for principles they held more valuable than life itself." Elena felt the weight of every eye in the chamber. This was humanity's moment of judgment, but it had been purchased with the blood of 12,000 human spacers who would never see the result of their sacrifice. The hegemony delegate, one of 3 survivors allowed to attend under strict guard, spoke with barely contained contempt. "The humans fought with typical mammalian aggression. Their tactics were brilliant," interrupted Chancellor Roth, his scales shifting to the deep blue of serious consideration. "And their sacrifice was magnificent." Elena stepped forward. "Honored representatives, I cannot stand here and claim humanity deserves membership based on one battle. But I can tell you what that battle represents. Not human aggression, but human principle. Not our desire for conflict, but our commitment to protection." She activated her display, showing images from the evacuated civilian ships. Families from 17 different species, including hegemony civilians who had sought refugee status decades ago. Captain Park and her crews didn't die for human interests. They died for the idea that some things transcend species, politics, and protocol. They died because they believed the strong should protect the weak, regardless of the cost. The crystalline Vec delegation resonated in harmony, their harmonics translating as profound agreement. Archivist Prime Keldon's voice carried across the chamber. "In 3,000 years of Council history, no species has demonstrated such commitment to beings outside their own kind. The archives contain no parallel to this sacrifice." Elena looked around the chamber, seeing the faces and sensory organs of dozens of species. The galaxy is vast and full of wonders, but it's also full of predators like the hegemony, beings who see strength as license to prey upon the weak. The Council was founded on the principle that civilization requires cooperation, that diversity creates strength, and that justice depends on those with power choosing to protect rather than exploit. Her voice carried clearly to every corner of the massive chamber. Humanity asks not for charity, but for partnership. We offer not submission, but service. We bring not just our ships and technology, but our willingness to stand between the darkness and the light, no matter the cost. Chancellor Roth called for formal statements from each delegation. One by one, species that had been suspicious of humanity's aggressive tendencies spoke in favor of membership. The Mora praised human defensive coordination. The Brutans acknowledged human tactical excellence. Even the traditionally isolationist Phantom Coalition expressed support. When the preliminary vote was tallied, the result was unprecedented. 46 species in favor, 1 abstention, 0 opposition. The hegemony delegate had been removed from the chamber after attempting to disrupt proceedings. But Elena knew the real test came next: the formal membership requirements and integration protocols. Chancellor Roth's scales shifted to ceremonial, silver as he addressed the chamber. The Council finds that humanity has demonstrated exceptional commitment to Council principles through action rather than words. However, full membership requires more than heroic sacrifice. It requires integration with our systems, acceptance of our protocols, and commitment to our processes. Elena smiled, thinking of Captain Park's final words to Admiral Thex. Chancellor, we understand that membership means responsibility. We accept Council protocols and procedures, but we also hope the Council has learned something from recent events. Explain, Roth requested. Sometimes the most important principle is knowing when to break the rules for a higher purpose. Sometimes doing what's right matters more than doing what's proper. The galaxy needs both order and justice, and sometimes justice requires someone willing to act when others hesitate. The vote on full membership was scheduled for the following day, but Elena already knew the outcome. Humanity had proven itself in the crucible of combat, but more importantly, it had proven itself in the crucible of choice, choosing to protect others at ultimate cost. As the session adjourned, Chancellor Roth approached her personally. Ambassador Vasquez, your species has changed the Council's understanding of courage. We hope the Council can change humanity's understanding of wisdom. Elena smiled, touching the defiance insignia on her collar. Chancellor, we're ready to learn. 6 months after humanity's formal admission to the Galactic Council, Elena found herself in the middle of her greatest diplomatic challenge yet. Not with alien species, but with her own kind. The integration protocols had proven more complex than anyone anticipated, and not all humans were pleased with the constraints of Council membership. This is intolerable, Admiral Burke declared, his fist hitting the conference table aboard the UES Unity, humanity's new flagship. We've gone from defending 3 systems to being assigned patrol duties in sectors that haven't seen combat in centuries. Elena looked around the room at the assembled human leadership. Military commanders, colonial governors, and corporate representatives who had built humanity's presence among the stars through decades of independent action. The transition to Council oversight challenged everything they'd learned about survival in the galaxy. Admiral, the Council's patrol assignments serve an important purpose, Elena replied patiently. They're integrating our forces with established defense networks and demonstrating our commitment to collective security. Collective security that fails every time it's tested, countered Governor Adams from the Kepler colonies. When the hegemony attacked, where was this collective security? Our people died because the Council couldn't make decisions fast enough. Elena felt the weight of their frustration. These were the leaders who had guided humanity from a single-world species to a galactic presence. They had made hard choices, without committees, acted without endless debate, and built a human civilization based on pragmatic decisiveness. The Council isn't just about military response, she said. It's about trade agreements, resource sharing, technological exchange, and diplomatic solutions to conflicts. Commander Torres, the hero of the Proxima rescue operation, leaned forward. Elena, we've been sharing technology for 6 months. What have we received in return besides restrictions on our operational autonomy? Elena activated her display, showing recent Council activities. Medical advances from the UN that have extended human lifespan by an average of 12 years. Stellar engineering techniques from the VEC that have tripled our energy efficiency. agricultural innovations from the Mora that have eliminated food scarcity on 17 human worlds. All valuable, acknowledged Dr. Kim, head of human scientific operations, but accessed at the cost of submitting all our research to council oversight. They've classified our defensive innovations as potentially destabilizing and restricted their deployment. Ellen aside. This was the core issue: humanity's rapid advancement in military technology, driven by decades of operating in dangerous space, was making other council species nervous. Human ships were faster, human weapons more effective, and human tactics more aggressive than council norms. The restriction on plasma lance deployment isn't about limiting human capabilities, Elena explained. It's about preventing an arms race that could destabilize the entire galactic balance. Admiral Burke's expression hardened. Balance? Elena, the hegemony is still out there. The Draknari are regrouping in the outer rim. Unknown threats emerge from deep space every year. This balance you're protecting is what nearly got the UN exterminated. Elena stood and walked to the viewport, looking out at the bustling space around council headquarters. Dozens of species ships moved in coordinated patterns, their crews working together on missions that would have been impossible for any single civilization to accomplish. I've spent the last 6 months learning how the council really works, she said quietly. Yes, it's slow. Yes, it's bureaucratic. Yes, it sometimes fails to act when action is needed. But it's also the only thing standing between 47 different species and constant warfare. She turned back to face the assembled leaders. Before the council, this galaxy burned with conflict for millennia. Species fought over resources, territory, and ideology until entire civilizations vanished. The council ended that cycle by creating a framework for cooperation instead of competition. And when that framework fails, Torres asked pointedly, then someone needs to be ready to act, Elena admitted. That's humanity's role now, not to replace the council's decision-making process, but to be its emergency response when diplomacy isn't enough. Dr. Kim looked up from his datapad. Elena, I've been analyzing the integration requirements. There's a pattern here. The council is essentially asking us to become more like them. Slower, more deliberate, more focused on process than results. Elena nodded. And we're asking them to become more like us, faster to act, more willing to take risks, more focused on results than process. The question is whether we can find a middle ground. Admiral Burke crossed his arms. What kind of middle ground? Elena returned to the table and activated a new display showing proposed modifications to council protocols. I've been working with Chancellor Roth on establishing rapid response authorization, essentially pre-approved authority for human forces to act in emergency situations without waiting for full council debate. The room stirred with interest. Governor Adams leaned forward. Explain. Specific scenarios where human commanders would have authorization to engage threats immediately, with council oversight occurring after the fact rather than before. It maintains council authority while acknowledging that some situations require immediate action. Commander Torres studied the proposal. The council agreed to this? They're considering it, Elena replied. The Battle of Kepler 438b demonstrated that sometimes waiting for proper authorization means accepting unacceptable casualties. But they need assurance that human forces won't abuse this authority. Admiral Burke's expression softened slightly. What kind of assurance? Elena smiled, thinking of Captain Park's final transmission. The same assurance we've always given. Our word that we'll use power to protect rather than conquer. The same principles that led Captain Park to sacrifice her ship for strangers. The same values that made humanity willing to risk everything for council membership. Dr. Kim closed his datapad. Elena, you're asking us to trust that the council will honor agreements when their own survival isn't at stake. No, Elena replied. I'm asking you to trust that our principles are stronger than their bureaucracy. When the next crisis comes, and it will come, humanity will be ready, and this time, we won't be standing alone. The meeting continued for several more hours, but Elena could see the shift in attitudes. Humanity was learning to work within the Council's framework, while the Council was learning to accommodate humanity's unique approach to galactic citizenship. 6 months ago, Humanity had bought its place in galactic civilization with blood and sacrifice. Now came the harder task, proving they could be trusted with the power that membership brought. 2 years after the Battle of Kepler 438b, Elena stood in the observation deck of the UES Harmony as it approached the Frontier Nexus, a massive space station at the galaxy's edge where the Council's newest initiative was taking shape. Through the viewports, she could see construction ships from dozens of species working together to build humanity's most ambitious project yet. "Status report, Commander Hayes?" she asked the station's human coordinator. "Integration proceeding. Ahead of schedule," Hayes replied, his pride evident. "We have permanent representatives from 32 species, with rotating delegations from the others. The Rapid Response Fleet is fully operational with mixed crews and unified command structure." Elena smiled as she watched a Bruton engineer working alongside a human technician, their 4 arms and 2 arms moving in perfect coordination to install a quantum communication array. The Frontier Nexus represented everything humanity had hoped to achieve. A truly integrated approach to galactic security that combined Council wisdom with human urgency. "Incoming priority transmission from Council headquarters," announced the communications officer. The main display flickered to show Chancellor Roth, his scales the deep gold of ceremonial importance. "Ambassador Vasquez, we have a situation developing. In the Outer Rim, long-range sensors detect an unknown fleet approaching from extragalactic space. Size and intentions unknown." Elena felt the familiar tightness in her chest that came with potential crisis. "How long until they reach inhabited space?" "Current projections suggest 14 standard days to the nearest populated system," Roth replied. "The Council is convening emergency session, but given the distance and response time required, we're implementing rapid response authorization." Elena nodded, understanding the implications. This was the first test of the new protocols. Humanity's emergency authority balanced by Council oversight. "What are our orders, Chancellor?" "Investigate and assess. Attempt communication. If hostile intent is confirmed, you have authorization to take whatever action is necessary to protect Council space." The transmission ended, and Elena turned to Hayes. "Alert all rapid response units. I want the fleet assembled and ready for departure within 6 hours." As alarms sounded throughout the Nexus, Elena watched the incredible coordination of the integrated response. Human efficiency merged with Velan tactical planning, Bruton engineering expertise, and UN diplomatic protocols. Species that had been fighting each other for millennia now worked as a unified force. Captain Martinez, now commanding the rebuilt UES Defiant, appeared on the communications array. "Ambassador, the Rapid Response Fleet is ready. 47 ships representing 12 species, unified command structure, and full Council authorization for discretionary action." Elena looked at the tactical displays showing the approaching unknown fleet. Whatever came next would test not just humanity's military capabilities, but the new model of galactic cooperation they had helped create. "Captain, set course for the intercept coordinates. Anne Martinez, remember what we learned at Kepler 438b. Sometimes the most important victory is showing the universe what principles look like when tested by fire." As the Rapid Response Fleet departed the Nexus, Elena received personal messages from around the galaxy. Chancellor Roth expressing confidence in human leadership. The UN delegation offering prayers for successful peaceful contact. Admiral Kress acknowledging the tactical soundness of the integrated fleet composition. But the message that mattered most came from Earth itself, from the families of the crews who had died defending Kepler 438b. Their words were simple. Make their sacrifice mean something. 3 days later, the Rapid Response Fleet encountered the unknown vessels at the edge of Council space. Elena stood on the bridge of the Harmony as first contact protocols engaged. The alien ships were unlike anything in Council databases, organic-looking. Vessels that seemed to pulse with their own internal light. "Unknown vessels. This is Ambassador Elena Vasquez of the Galactic Council," she transmitted. "You have entered Council space. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions." The response came in a harmony of voices speaking perfect Council. Standard. "We are the Wanderers, the last children of the Andromeda Spiral. Our worlds are gone, consumed by darkness. We seek refuge and the hope of new beginnings." Elena exchanged glances with her mixed-species crew. Refugees, not invaders. But refugees with technology that had crossed the intergalactic void, potentially, more advanced than anything in Council space. Wanderers, I am authorized to speak for the Galactic Council. You are welcome in our space while we determine how best to assist you. But you must understand, we have learned to be cautious about those who arrive with great power and desperate need. The alien response carried undertones of both hope and sadness. We understand, Ambassador. We have seen what desperation can drive beings to do. We offer ourselves for examination, for judgment, for whatever tests you deem necessary. We seek only the chance to survive and, perhaps, to serve. Elena felt the weight of decision settling on her shoulders. This was why humanity had fought for Council membership. Not for the privilege of following orders, but for the responsibility of making the hard choices when the galaxy's future hung in the balance. Wanderers, you will be escorted to Frontier, Nexus for formal first contact procedures. But understand, the Council has learned that actions speak louder than words. You will be judged not by your desperation, but by how you choose to use whatever power you possess. As the combined fleet escorted the Wanderer vessels toward the Nexus, Elena received a priority transmission from Earth. It was from Admiral Chen, the new head of Human Fleet Command, and his message was brief but significant. Elena, preliminary analysis of the Wanderer ships suggests technology that could revolutionize galactic civilization, or destroy it. The Council is looking to humanity for guidance on how to proceed. Elena smiled, thinking of all the battles that had brought humanity to this moment. From Captain Park's last stand to the integration protocols that had nearly torn human leadership apart, every challenge had been preparation for this, the moment when humanity's unique perspective on power and principle would truly matter. Captain Martinez, she called across the bridge, send a message to Council headquarters. Tell them that humanity recommends proceeding with caution, but also with hope. The galaxy has room for refugees who choose service over conquest. She paused, looking out at the escort formation where human ships flew alongside vessels from a dozen other species, protecting and guiding beings from another galaxy entirely. And tell them that humanity stands ready to help make that choice possible, whatever the cost. As the fleet approached Frontier Nexus, Elena reflected on how far they had all come. Humanity had entered the galactic community as aggressive outsiders, suspected of being too dangerous for civilized space. Now they served as the Council's moral compass and emergency response force, not because they had changed their nature, but because they had learned to channel it. The Wanderers represented a new test of that evolution. Advanced refugees with unknown capabilities could become either the Council's greatest asset or its greatest threat. The decision of which path they took would depend largely on how humanity, and the Council they now helped guide, chose to welcome them. Elena looked at her mixed-species crew, at the integrated fleet around her, and at the unknown vessels they were escorting to safety. The galaxy was vast and full of challenges, but it was also full of possibilities. And for the first time since leaving Earth's solar system, humanity was not facing those possibilities alone. Bridge to all hands, she announced throughout the ship. We are about to make history, not as humans or Velans or Brutans, but as citizens of a galaxy that has learned to turn strangers into allies, refugees into contributors, and diversity into strength. She smiled, thinking of the diplomatic dispatches that would carry news of this encounter to every corner of Council space. The reports would speak of successful first contact, careful security protocols, and the gradual integration of a new species into galactic civilization. But Elena knew the real story was simpler and more profound. A bunch of different species had learned to work together, to trust each other with their fears and hopes, and to face the unknown as partners rather than competitors. It had taken a war, a sacrifice, and 2 years of difficult integration to get here. But as the Frontier Nexus grew larger in the viewports, Elena knew it had been worth every challenge. The stars were vast, but they were no longer lonely. And somewhere in the depths of space, other civilizations looking toward the galaxy's edge would see not conquest or chaos, but the light of cooperation shining against the dark. The diplomatic dispatches from the stars would carry that message to future generations. The universe was dangerous, but it was also full of hope. As long as someone was willing to stand between the darkness and the light, whatever the cost. The end.